Why yes, I did become a father of 2 literally 2 days ago, which means this might be our last video till Christmas. But soon after that, there is the new year. And after that, we should get a new cinematic. We haven't gotten those in a while. But thankfully, even though it is December, everyone is on a break and no one's really watching videos, we do have topics to talk about. One of which is a particularly interesting topic to mention because we are talking about Mordekaiser. Again. You see, every time all the new cards for Legends of Runeterra come out, all the artists that worked on all of those post not only the final art in their portfolio, but also some of the concepts. And sometimes these concepts reveal something cool, which especially became the case with Mordekaiser. So once the new expansion came out on the art station of Kudo's production, we could see what the process behind creating the new Mordekaiser was like. Now of course, first we can see the final Mordekaiser there, which is what we also saw in all the teasers. And yes, it also does have some detailed side views, which especially cosplayers are going to like. But the way how they got to that final concept is really interesting. See, at the beginning you get these rough concepts, which are supposed to slowly narrow it down to the final designs. And in the case of Mordekaiser, it started with branching out. Do we go with a more Wraith-like character, or do we go for a more solid warrior? Of course, we all know which one Riot went for. And from there, we get some further development. On the right side, you can see some of the more wilder takes. These would be generally further away from the classic Mordekaiser, which would be especially obvious with the overall silhouette. On the right side, believe it or not, he is a lot more rounder, which is definitely not what Noxus is about. And there, on the 2 versions, you can see how they alternated between different kinds of cloaks. On the left side, however, we got a lot closer to the classic Mordekaiser everyone loves. He got the flattened out shoulders with the spikes, just like what he has in League, but I like how they still try to give him something new, for example, the skeletal banner. There you can see that he had pieces of metal mimic rib cages around the banners. And I have to say, that concept overall looked pretty good. And if that one came out as the final product, I don't think anyone would be mad. But you see, it was after this that we got a really interesting piece of concept art. You see, in order to figure out what Mordekaiser looks like as a proper badass wraith-like undead king, they would first have to know what he looked like when he was alive, so that they could base his undead form on that. And so, we did actually get a proper concept art for what Mordekaiser looked like when he was alive. Which, by the way, yes, we should point out that when Mordekaiser was alive, he was not called Mordekaiser. He was called Sun Uzal, with Mordekaiser being his name spoken in the language of the dead, that being Oknun. So no, it's not a German translation. Anyway, yes, this is Sun Uzal. And before we dive into the design itself, yes, I have to say, this can absolutely be real. We'll dive into this topic a little bit more in just a second. But just know that the point of these kinds of concept arts is to lay a base for what is inside the universe. Yes, if Riot really needs to tell a story from the past, they can change his design however they want to fit their story. But this should still be the core appearance that can tie everything together. I hope at least someone understands what I just said, because yes, it does sound crazy. Anyway, first things first. Yes, he does kinda look like Sauron, doesn't he? And he's all the better for it. Remember, Sun Uzal is pretty much the primal Noxian. That's the guy that built Noxus, which then turned into the Noxian Empire. So here you can see the primal example after which everything around Noxus was modeled. That's the thing. This is technically not based on Noxus. Noxus is based on this. And yes, I love the chunky metal plate. I love the fur around his neck, because remember, Noxus also fought a lot in the north. And look at that massive, majestic red cloak. Like, I have absolutely no objections against this. Which is why it is also cool to point out that this, technically, could still be canon. As I mentioned last time in the video where we also talked about Mordekaiser, he could technically have 2 kinds of armor. The one that you can see in League, because that's what he looked like when he was on Runeterra after he was already resurrected as a undead warlord. And the second set of armor which he has when he is inside his Grey Realm. So in Mordekaiser's case, both the League of Legends design and the Legends of Runeterra design can be canon. We still don't know if it is the same kind of armor, just two different variations of it, but Riot still has the option to decide whatever they want it to be the case. Because again, remember that when he is inside the realm of the dead, he is constantly shaping souls into pieces of metal from which he can craft a new armor or a new weapon. Now here's the thing. When he was alive, he had to have some kind of armor, which had to be a piece of armor which he died in, after which he got into the realm of the dead, he freaked out that there were no gods, he decided to become a god himself, after which he convinced some crazy people to summon him back into the world. Now the chances are, maybe they didn't re-summon him back into his original armor. Unless they were somehow able to find it, it is possible that Mordekaiser just crafted his own new armor, just like he did Nightfall, which actually serves as a pretty good bridge for this theory. That being the theory that this is a third piece of armor that Mordekaiser had, and it's also canon. I hope you're not getting lost, this is a very serious topic. Anyway, the point is, yes, he crafted Nightfall using mortal souls, which should mean that the mace in this concept art is different from Nightfall. So if this is a different mace he had, it also has to be a different armor, which can also be canon. I know that this is just concept, but it is genuinely fun to dive into these kinds of topics. Speaking of which, a lot of people loved debating what he actually looked like as a human, which is what all of these show us. Now I'll be real, knowing his entire lore, Mordekaiser was a bit of a madman. He was a brutal warlord that killed tens of thousands on his own. I never imagined him as Reinhardt. For the most part, I saw that people like the top right version. That one does look a little bit like a proper berserk. But I'll be honest, it has to be the bald guy. First of all, the Noxian tattoo is absolutely badass. But also, he was a proper warrior. He would know that having hair in battle would be a weakness. It is something the enemy can grab onto. Not to mention, from a warrior's perspective, it is a worthless piece of something on your head that is going to make you sweat. So yes, I did kinda imagine him more like that. Although I have to admit, I never really thought about it. But you know what's cool? After Riot had this base version of Sun Uzal nailed down, they then started working on his undead version. And it all started by the concept artists going wild. We got a more bony version, which really evokes the primal Noxus. Like, yeah, the times when Sun Uzal was alive were a lot more medieval. Not that that wouldn't be the case now, it's just that now we do have guns and stuff. Don't forget the cars. The second concept here is the closest to what we actually got. And even here I have to say that I love the helmet. Yes, it is very far from what we got before, but the shape in general still works. And then they also toyed with a more Wraith-like version. This one doesn't even have legs because, I'll be honest, in his realm of the dead, why would he have legs? Maybe he should be able to just transport everywhere as he wants. I mean, it is his realm now. Truth be told, I have to admit, this one also looks badass. With the last concept being a lot more infernal. I mean, this one still looks cool, but it looks a lot better as a skin. I've never really connected Mordekaiser with demonic fire or anything like that. Although he is always forging souls. Anyway, after that, after they chose what would be the closest to the proper winner, they still had one more task to do, and that is a task that a lot of people talked about. And that's the fact that Mordekaiser is blue. So, they did experiment with other colors. And the trio they gave a shot was the classic sickly green, blue, as well as red. Now, as I mentioned before, I still think blue Mordekaiser is fine. It makes sense for multiple reasons. Sickly green is specifically tied to the undead magic that Viego started. It is pretty much reserved for all the souls who are locked into the mortal plane, even though they really wanna be dead. Blue is the color of more free spirits, those unaffected by really horrible kinds of magic. And Mordekaiser, believe it or not, is not tied to the Shadow Isles. So he is not affected by it, and so he is technically a free blue soul. I have to say though, I like that they also experimented with red. Just because it is Noxus, it is Mordekaiser, it would be cool if his realm was red, but from the universe's perspective, that would be pretty confusing. So yes, he does look cool when he's red, but it wouldn't really make sense. And that is how we ended with the Mordekaiser we got. Now, we talked about this new design a lot in the previous videos, but looking at this, I realized what's the one thing I'm not really sure about. It's the fact that I can see his face. Yes, this was the case with the old Mordekaiser too, but I like how the new one is a lot more mysterious. You're not supposed to see the face. But you know what? Even though this is everything I wanted to talk about when it comes to Mordekaiser, that being primarily his San Uzal design, which is really cool, the new expansion got more concepts which more people might be interested in. For example, we didn't really talk about the new Mira, which is the mother of Kael and Morgana. You see, there is still the debate where people theorize what is Mira actually doing here. Like, is this her previous form before she gave up on her powers as she threw her blade to her daughters? And then she turned into whatever that is? Or is this her human form and she can decide when she wants to swap? Kinda like how Janna also has her ascended form and then her human form. Well, we still don't properly know, but it is cool to see all the theories floating around. Just like it is cool to see that Riot also gave us her normal human form before she became an Ascended. Yes, even though this might not mean much, this is Mira's proper human form. Before she climbed Mount Targon and before she ascended. Just like with Mordekaiser, they had to get the base human form down before she gave her the more ascended version. So again, this is still just a random piece of behind the scenes concept art, but in a way you may consider it as a light canon, because everything that came out of it was still based on it. I know this is confusing, but this is generally how we should treat these. Though with that said, there were times in the past where these concept arts dove somewhere where they shouldn't. They crossed the line, and that line was revealing Jin's face. Yes, this one sparked quite the drama around the lore community, because everyone was trying to explain everyone else that this is actually not canon. This was just a guide all the artists had when they were drawing Jin. That still didn't mean this is what Jin looks like without the mask, which is something the people who were not involved in the lore didn't really care about. And so the word spread around the internet that this is what Jin looks like without his mask. But now you may be asking, where did this piece of art come from? Well, you see, originally, if you bought the Z comic, inside the comic you had some extra pages that showed you some extra things which you wouldn't be able to see on the internet. With one part actually showing you Jin without the mask. The thing is, in the comic it was censored. On purpose. Because Riot knew revealing this would be pretty bad. The point is for Jin to be this mysterious person that's kinda faceless. Once you reveal the face, he wouldn't be faceless anymore. But unfortunately, eventually the artist that was working on this piece of art came out with their portfolio, and there was Jin. Does this mean that this shouldn't be taken just as seriously? Yes, absolutely, that's what I'm trying to tell you the entire time. This video has to be so confusing. So you know what? That's really all I wanted to talk about. Seeing San Uzal in his human form is really cool. But that's really where all of this stops. It's cool, but that's it. Just like that's it for this video. Again, as I mentioned, there is a high likelihood that I won't have too much free time, at least until New Year. I think it should be obvious why. I have a new member of the family to take care of. So yes, normally I would end these videos with a joke. But now, I just have to go off. Someone has to train them to become raid healers.